Hey, how's it going guys, Chris here, checking out another one of those Battlefield 1 Apocalypse DLC weapons. And today's video is going to be all about the M1917 Enfield, a US modification of the British designed P14 that actually ended up being America's most popular rifle during the Great War. The M1917 Enfield, which is often just called the American Enfield, was basically a newer version of the Pattern 14 rifle, which was converted to fire the 30-06 service cartridge instead of the 303 British round used in the Lee Enfield SMLE. The way that the P14 was designed meant that it was well suited to use the Springfield cartridge, with the rifle having a strong and sturdy mechanism that could accommodate those powerful bullets. The P14's bolt face, stripper clip feed, internal box magazine, chamber and rifling dimensions were all slightly altered to use the 30-06 cartridges, along with the US pattern 5-round clips that housed them. The stock was changed a bit, and a new 16.5-inch bayonet was made especially for the gun, which would later be used on a few other weapons like the M12 trench shotguns and even the early models of the M1 Garand. But nevertheless, it was a very similar rifle to the Pattern 14 overall, meaning it was a pretty heavy and awkward weapon to carry around. A lot of troops didn't really like them, as they were a bit of a pain to wield in the trenches or use in close range combat situations, with the gun often being taller than the guy holding it. Though these factors also meant that it could perform quite accurately over distance, making it a better weapon for snipers. The gun's rear sights were protected by a pair of sturdy metal ears, which seemed to be favoured by the American Army a lot, as quite a few of their future infantry rifles would also feature similar sights, like the M1903 A3 Springfield, M1 Garand and the M1 Carbine. So in the early 1900s, the British Army were fighting in the Second Boer War up until 1902, and they found that their SMLE rifles just couldn't match up to their competition in long-range combat, being outclassed by the Mauser M95 used by Boer forces. The M95 was a lot more accurate and powerful at further distances, giving the enemy an advantage in the wide open spaces of South Africa. So it was decided in 1910 that a new Mauser-styled rifle would be designed, leading to the creation of the Pattern 13, along with a new 7mm cartridge. But World War I was just around the corner, and the British Army just weren't ready to swap out their SMLEs and 303 ammo in favour of something new. It was also practically impossible to manufacture the P13 too, down to all of the other factories working away to produce as many Lee Enfield rifles as possible to arm British troops. Though there was still an urgent need for rifles, so the government looked overseas, and production contracts for a 303 caliber model of the Enfield, called the Pattern 14, was issued to several different American weapon manufacturers, which would make the P14s and then send them over to Europe to be used by the Brits. But when the United States entered the war in 1917, they were also met with a very similar issue, as factories in America weren't able to crank out enough M1903 rifles fast enough to arm their soldiers. And with the Pattern 14's production coming to an end, the US adopted the P14 design and altered it to fire their native round instead, essentially becoming the American Enfield. Despite the M1903 Springfield being the official service rifle for American troops during World War I, the M1917 Enfield's production surpassed the M1903's by miles, with over twice as many copies being created in total. And in 1918, approximately 3 out of every 4 American soldiers carried the M1917 Enfield, making it the most common US rifle during the Great War. So to unlock the M1917 Enfield, you're going to need that Apocalypse DLC first and foremost, and then you'll need to complete 2 specific assignments. The first task just requires you to get 50 kills with the Ross MkIII. So you'll need to unlock the Ross MkIII Infantry by getting 50 scout kills, and then you can rack up another 50 kills with that Ross rifle in the game mode of your choice. Though to complete the second challenge, you'll have to accumulate 2,500 meters of headshots using single action rifles. This doesn't have to be completed within a single round, and it's probably best to hop into a map with lots of long open sight lines like Monte Grappa or Galicia, and equip a sniper variant kitted out with some long magnification optics and just keep blasting at the scouts' heads off at long ranges, as you'll complete this task much easier by taking on targets that are far away in the distance. There, all you basically have to do is keep landing headshots with scout rifles until you've done the task, and you'll be able to equip the M1917 Enfield on a scout loadout as soon as you do so. But anyway, time to run over those stats. Because the M1917 Enfield fires the same 30-06 cartridge as the M1903, this means that it's going to deal the same amount of damage, dishing out a minimum of 80 up to 80 meters, which is then going to start to increase from here, up to that maximum damage of 100 at 100 meters. This is where that sweet spot zone begins, allowing you to potentially kill an enemy with a single bullet to the chest, and ultimately deal the most damage against another player by landing body shots. And this zone is going to last up to 150 meters, which is where that damage will start to decline again, back to that minimum value of 80 at 190 meters and beyond. So the rifle is gifted with a pretty wide one-hit kill area, and it's generally going to be deadly to use against players further away in the distance. Though it's not exactly a very powerful gun for closer to medium range fights, limiting its ability as being an effective aggressive rifle for attacking the enemy team head on. Down to the way the damage multipliers work in Battlefield 1, shots to the lower body or upper arms are only going to deal 72 damage up to 80 meters, and a hit to the leg or forearm could reduce the damage even more, down to as low as 60 at these ranges also, potentially giving the gun some of the lowest damage readings within those offensive ranges, where you'll likely run into enemy players a lot of the time. Though a shot to the noggin is always going to take down another player instantly, so it's definitely more beneficial to land headshots at closer to medium ranges whenever you can, as you won't be able to kill them in one bullet otherwise, unless your target has already been weakened first. The M1917 Enfield fires at the fairly decent speed of 60 RPM, which is by no means the fastest, but still a lot quicker than a good majority of the other rifles, beating the M1903 by 7 RPM, and essentially giving it a faster time to kill. It's only a tiny bit slower than the Ross MkIII, which probably won't be very noticeable, and the gun can also be bolted whilst remaining down those sights too, allowing you to take advantage of that faster than average RPM, and therefore kill targets slightly quicker in the process. This can be really useful when you're taking on enemies outside of that sweet spot zone, as although you'll be dealing a lower amount of damage, you'll be able to land 2 shots on target in less time, giving the rifle a little bit more usability at medium ranges. Though as far as 2-shot kills go, it's not quite got the edge over the likes of the Gewehr M95 or the Carcano, boasting even faster times to kill still. One of the best things about the Enfield is the fact that its bullets are fired out at the rapid velocity of 820 meters per second, so the same as the M1903. And this means that you'll barely have to lead your target's movements at all, which is made even easier by the gun using shorter ranged optics only. This makes it a fairly reliable weapon for landing shots, including at those longer ranges where your bullets are going to pack the biggest punch. And although its velocity can be beaten by the Gewehr 98, it's still higher than most of the other rifles in the game, making moving targets less of a struggle to deal with overall. Something that doesn't come as a massive surprise is that the Enfield is basically going to function in the same sort of way as the other Scout rifles, as far as accuracy is concerned. It's got the standard vertical recoil value of 2 and horizontal value of 1, so it's not got any kind of statistical difference for its recoil pattern. Though being an infantry variant, the gun does have the same advantages as the other infantry variants, with a faster recoil and spread decrease rate, allowing it to recover from both recoil and spread a tad quicker after every pull of the trigger. Which is complemented by the fact that the gun can remain in ADS while cycling the bolt, making it easier to land that second killing shot on target weakened by your first. But when it comes to accuracy, although the M1917 is similar to a lot of the other rifles, it can often be a bit tricky to take advantage of the weapon's sweet spot zone, with it being so far out, and with you only having access to lower magnification optics. So if you want to get those one-hit kills, you've basically got to aim at dots in the distance, and hope for the best that your bullet doesn't hit a limb, which would definitely be easier to do with a longer range sight. The gun's high muzzle velocity is going to help you to land shots to a certain degree, but because you've not exactly got a very clear view of targets in the distance, despite being a weapon best suited for longer range takedowns, this does go against the gun's overall practicality, often giving other long range rifles like the M1903 and Gewehr 98 a bit of an edge in head-to-head showdowns with other snipers, with them having access to higher zoom levels, thus catering for their role in the game a little bit better. An interesting thing to point out about the M1917 Enfield is the fact that it can hold an extra bullet than a lot of the other Scout rifles, bumping that ammo capacity up to 6 rounds in total, which means you can take out between 3 or 6 enemies per full magazine, providing all of those shots land bang on target. The Gewehr M95 also holds a 6-round clip, but isn't capable of killing 6 enemies, unless they've all already been weakened first, or unless every shot hits a target in the face. Though the Enfield doesn't hold a 6-round clip like the Gewehr M95, and instead holds one 5-round clip along with an extra single round, giving the gun some dynamic reloads that vary in speed depending on when you choose to perform them. But the problem here is that no matter when you hit that reload button, it's usually going to be quite slow anyway, and to refill an empty magazine, you're going to have to perform a clip reload along with a single bullet top-up, lasting 4.8 seconds in total. 1 second longer than most of the other rifles in exchange for one extra round to use against the enemy. Tactical reloads will also take quite a while to do too, taking up to 3 seconds just to slot a fresh bullet back into that magazine on its own. Plus it could take up to 5.4 seconds to top the gun up with another 4 singular rounds, which is the longest time you'll have to wait whilst reloading the M1917. Though because the rifle uses those 5-round clips, which take just under 4 seconds to slot in, it can often be best to try and get in the habit of reloading when you've got a bullet left over in the chamber, unless you're in a position to use that bullet to kill another player, of course. But anyway, in conclusion, the M1917 Enfield is basically DICE's answer to the M1903 Infantry variant, with some slightly different stats thrown into the mix to make it a bit more beneficial over ranges outside of that one-hit kill area, far away in the distance. It's still got a lot in common with the M1903, so it's going to be most effective in long-range combat, dealing the highest amount of damage further away. But this also makes it a weaker rifle to use for close to mid-range battles, putting you at a slight disadvantage when you're advancing on enemy positions and using that gun offensively. The weapon's high muzzle velocity is something that makes it easier to land shots over all distances, and the fact that its rate of fire is also slightly faster than a lot of other scout rifles makes the gun a bit more usable for a wider range of situations when compared to some of the others, being able to land 2 consecutive shots on target a little bit quicker than other long-range rifles, thus generally reducing that kill time by a bit in the process. The M1917 isn't really made for mid-ranged encounters, and there's lots of other options in the game that have better factors for taking on enemies at medium distances, either dealing stronger amounts of damage at closer ranges or firing at quicker speeds. But the Enfield can still perform fine enough over most ranges, but it's not exactly the most effective option to pick if you like to play closer to all the action. But although the Enfield is best suited for long distance takedowns statistically, its lack of longer range optics prevent it from being a very accurate or reliable weapon to use for lining up shots within the gun's optimal range. And although it's still very usable against players running around far away, those lower magnification settings are less ideal for allowing the gun to do what it was designed to do, restricting its use for being a long-range killer machine by limiting you to those lower zoom levels. The rifle does hold an extra round than quite a lot of other scout weapons in the game, but although this additional 6 bullet might come in handy for finishing a weakened player off, something that you'll need to do a lot if you're planning on using the gun up close, it does come with the drawback of having some longer reload times as a trade-off, putting a little bit more pressure on you to land your shots on target. If you're looking for a high power weapon that can deliver some hard hits against enemies in the distance, but can still perform okay enough at closer ranges too, to a certain degree, then the M1917 Enfield isn't really a bad choice, boasting a higher than average bullet speed and fire rate to somewhat compensate for its lack of strength at earlier distances. But it's not really a fantastic choice either, with a lot of other guns having superior stats that allow them to be more effective at their own specific ranges. Though if you want to do some long range sniping with iron sights, then the Enfield will give you the best results most of the time. And it's probably the closest you're going to get to an M1903 infantry variant, should you want to use one on the battlefield. So that's pretty much it for another one, guys. Hope you enjoyed the guide. Give me a like if you did, and subscribe if you want to stay updated with new videos coming soon. Take it easy, and I'll see you in our next episode.